When 18-year-old Katie Pladl reconnected with her long-lost birth parents, she was overjoyed to discover that they were the loving family she had always dreamed of. Yet, within months, that dream had spiraled into an unimaginable nightmare with an incestuous affair and finally, the violent slaughter of 3 innocent people.
She has the chance to start over, and I hope she can. Emotionally and mentally abusive.
You may recall that those individuals...
He killed his baby.
20-year-old Katie Pladl.
Incestuous relationship with their biological daughter.
The shocking case of Stephen Pladl and his daughter Katie raises many disturbing questions, maybe the most important of which is, how did nobody see this coming? Please be warned, this is an educational video that touches on sensitive subject matter, including incest, grooming, and child abuse. Before we start, we would like to send our sincere condolences to the loved ones of all of those who fell victim to these abominable acts described in this case. This story takes us back to 1995. When a 20-year-old man named Stephen Pladl met 15-year-old Alyssa Garcia in an online chat room. At the time, Stephen was living with his mother in New York and was known as quite a loner. Former classmates remember him as the guy wearing the same hockey sweater every single day and for being the target of bullies. He was a strange guy, one classmate recalls.
You know, we never knew anything about it, but definitely you could say that it might be strange. Hockey jerseys, San Jose Sharks, every day. And we would be in same gym classes. They'd have the same grade, different grades in the same gym class. He was the type of kid that he would just never change from gym class, super quiet, other than when he had this, a few friends around. Something must have been off. How he was treated at home, or he was getting bullied in school. Something had to be off to get his life to this spot, and then to take down all these other lives as well. It's really horrible, heartbreaking.
15-year-old Alyssa, meanwhile, was living with her parents in San Antonio, Texas. She would later describe Stephen as actively grooming her, and when he turned up on her doorstep after traveling across the country to meet her, their relationship turned physical. Alyssa's parents did not approve, but for some reason felt helpless to intervene. Once back in New York, Stephen convinced Alyssa to run away from home. By the time she was 16, Alyssa was living with Stephen in New York and was pregnant with her first child. It wasn't long before Alyssa saw the darker side to the man who had wooed her away from her family. Stephen Pladl was not just a loner, but volatile, controlling, and violent. All too quickly, Alyssa found herself isolated from her family and caught in a cycle of abuse from which she couldn't escape.
He was verbally, emotionally, and mentally abusive throughout our 20 years together. Did do many violent things. He had nearly beaten to death one cat and did beat to death another cat. Predictably,
the arrival of the new baby, a little girl they named Denise, did nothing to help the situation. While Alyssa doted on her new daughter, Stephen rarely picked her up and was reluctant to feed or change her. And even more alarming, was triggered into uncontrollable rages by her crying.
She would cry, and it would just instantly trigger him. He would curse, he would tell me to shut her the hell up. He would at times scoop her up and place her into a big cooler that we had. And then sometimes he would just shut it tight. He knew it was possible she could be dead, and he was not fazed by it. So I would finally go back there and open it and get her out.
Stephen took to pinching the baby until her tiny body was black and blue. When she cried, he would cover her mouth with his hand. There were also other, darker things that happened. Alyssa later said, "I would just scoop her up and shut the bedroom door, and I would rock her back and forth and tell her how sorry I was for the life she was having." By the time the baby was 8 months old, Alyssa said she felt a special kind of terror around Stephen. With his abuse escalating, she made the excruciating decision to place the baby up for adoption. She told her family that she had been unable to cope due to postpartum depression and that she was just not ready for a child. Baby Denise had the lucky escape. She was adopted by a loving couple, Anthony and Kelly Fusca. who renamed her Katie Fusco and offered her a new chance at life. Anthony was an officer with the State Department of Corrections and Kelly a secretary. The couple lived a modest, stable life in a trailer in Dover, a small town about 80 miles north of New York, and they raised Katie in a loving home alongside their own biological daughter. Alyssa, meanwhile, suffered deep feelings of regret and loss. She felt more dependent on Stephen than ever, and in 2006 agreed to marry him. She remembers convincing herself that he could change and dreaming of a picture-perfect marital home. Instead, life with Stephen would steadily unravel into a house of horrors. 9 years after baby Denise became Katie Fusco, Alyssa and Stephen welcomed another baby girl into their lives. 5 years later, a third baby girl was born. Stephen was still volatile, but seemed to be better able to cope with parenthood. The family had moved to Henrico, a suburb of Richmond, Virginia. For Alyssa, it felt as though the family may have turned a corner. It wasn't to last, though. Stephen was unable to hold down a job, forcing Alyssa to work numerous jobs to keep the family afloat. During outbursts, he would throw furniture and punch holes in the wall. Twice, he beat a neighborhood cat after catching it in his garage. On the second occasion, he beat it to death before throwing it into a garbage bag and disposing of it in the trash. With plenty of time to spare, he developed an obsession with firearms and acquired quite a collection of weapons. Meanwhile, the family spent their time walking on eggshells around him. Alyssa did her best to protect her children, but with long hours spent at work, she was forced to leave them in his care. Once she came home and found a shivering 3-year-old standing in the bath, her legs soaked in urine. She had been standing there for hours as a punishment for not making it to the toilet in time. Alyssa made numerous attempts to leave him. Stephen responded by threatening to blow his brains out and ensure a recording of it was left for her and the children to watch afterwards. Alyssa felt trapped, and so, in August of 2015, when she received a friend request on social media from her long-lost daughter Denise, now known as Katie, it felt like a wonderful gift from the universe. Alyssa was thrilled to learn that her oldest daughter, now 17, had been thriving in such a normal and stable home. She was a cheerleader at Dover High School and loved animals so much that she had become a vegetarian. She even, ironically, had taken steps to look after stray cats. She was artistic and known in school for her impressive comic strips. Katie wrote about her love of art in a blog, saying, "A pen and something to draw on has become a safe place for me. Ink became my weapon against rules and regulations. To be short, for me, life without art is no life at all." She also had ambitious plans for her future. After graduation, she planned to attend a community college before transferring to the State University of New York, studying digital advertising. Life was pretty perfect, if it wasn't for her one little issue. For a long time, Katie had felt a deep inner pull to find out who her biological parents were. And in the summer of 2017, she set out to look for them on Facebook. Soon enough, she had found them both. To her surprise, she learned that her parents were still together and that she had 2 biological sisters, now 11 and 7. They looked like a wonderful, happy family. Even better, they responded enthusiastically to her tentative message introducing herself. Soon, Katie and her parents were communicating regularly, and plans were made for her to head down to Henrico to meet them. The Pladl family finally reunited in June of 2016, right after Katie's high school graduation. It was a moment of unbridled joy for Alyssa, who had been marking every birthday of Katie's for 18 years. The family spent the day together taking photos. They had clicked instantly and effortlessly. Communication continued after Katie returned home to Dover. Then she made a shock announcement. Instead of going to college, she was moving to Henrico County to live with her birth parents. Tony and Kelly Fusco were shocked and saddened. They were also apprehensive, but she was 18 and they had little choice but to let her go. Perhaps they could have probed more deeply for the reasons for the sudden change of heart, but didn't. In the months since meeting her, Alyssa had noticed a disturbing change in Stephen. The 41-year-old had suddenly begun showing more interest in his appearance. He bought new clothes, he shaved his beard, and let his hair grow out into the style of boys Katie's age. Alyssa assumed that he wanted to look like a cool dad to impress his eldest daughter, but it was just the first of many red flags. For 20 years, Stephen had threatened Alyssa if she even contemplated leaving him. Now, he was more than happy to move ahead with a separation. Not long after meeting Katie, the couple began sleeping in separate rooms, and plans were made for divorce. Alyssa was too focused on the arrival of her eldest daughter to question the sudden sea change. She was excited at the prospect of rekindling their mother-daughter bond. Within weeks of the arrival, however, it was clear that Katie's focus was elsewhere. While Alyssa was working long hours for T-Mobile, Katie was spending all day with her dad. Father and daughter had clearly forged a close bond, but Alyssa began to suspect that Stephen was actively turning Katie against her. Then, one night, around 6 weeks after Katie moved in, Alyssa learned that Stephen had begun sleeping on Katie's bedroom floor. She confronted Stephen, but he retaliated aggressively and stormed out of the house. It's hard to fathom why the reality of what was happening did not slip into place for her. At any rate, Alyssa pulled Katie aside and warned her about her father's dark side. She told her about the abuse that she had suffered at Stephen's hands when she was a baby. To her amazement, Katie dismissed it. Alyssa was ready to move out. She had been granted custody of her 2 girls and expected Katie to join them. She was shocked when Katie opted to stay with her father, but nothing could have prepared her for what she would learn in the coming months. In May of 2017, Alyssa's daughters came back from a weekend with Stephen and Katie. While unpacking her 11-year-old daughter's bag, Alyssa came across an entry in her daughter's journal that made the floor fall out from under her. The little girl had written about the relationship between Stephen and her sister Katie. In the journal, she had written, "Katie is my big sis, and I love her. I also love how she's skinny in areas and has smaller breasts. But how is she pregnant and gained weight and my dad calls her baby? Also his baby. Did he make her pregnant? My dad even says that she's my stepmom. WTF? He doesn't even want me to say or call her sister anymore. Katie is my sister. She's probably his wife now, but in nature, she's only my sister. Does she see me as a daughter or a sister? Katie now sometimes tells me to get the f*** up." Also in the diary were drawings of Stephen depicted as Satan. One had her running away from him saying, "Stop, Satan, get the f*** out." There was a short note written under the picture that read, "Wait 1 second. If he's Satan and Katie's human, then the baby will be half demon." The realization that Stephen had seduced Katie into an incestuous relationship horrified Alyssa. She had long suspected that Stephen was brainwashing Katie against her, but never in her wildest dreams or nightmares had she ever imagined Stephen would enter into a sexual relationship with his own daughter. She felt sick. It was too much to process, and he'd exposed her other 2 children to the whole sick setup. Alyssa recalls, "I started to become hysterical and I called him and I said, 'Is Katie pregnant with your baby?' He just said, 'I thought you knew. We're in love.' So I started screaming. I was cursing him out. 'How could you? You're sick. She's a child.' Then she called police. During the ensuing investigation, police questioned Stephen, Katie, and Alyssa's 2 youngest daughters, but no immediate arrests were made. Alyssa hoped the investigation would lead to Stephen's arrest, but on the 20th of July 2017, with the investigation still ongoing, 43-year-old Stephen Pladl married his 20-year-old daughter, Katie, in a romantic lakeside ceremony in Parkton, Maryland. Their marriage should have been illegal. But Stephen, of course, had lied on their application, saying they were not related. Katie wore a fitted black dress that showed her pregnant belly. Attending the wedding were Stephen's 72-year-old mom, Grace, and unbelievably, Katie's adoptive parents. With Katie already heavily pregnant, they had resigned themselves to the bizarre and disturbing situation. Images show them smiling next to their daughter and biological father, who had seduced and impregnated her, and now planned to spend his life as her partner. How had such a thing happened? Why had Katie responded to his advances, knowing that he was her biological father? The concept of incest makes most people instantly squeamish, and it is considered taboo in nearly every human culture around the world. In fact, a recent study revealed that humans realized as early as 34,000 years ago that inbreeding was best avoided. There are 2 states within America that still permit it, though it is still arguably taboo. Yet, despite so much aversion, in recent years there have been dozens of high-profile instances of incest in the media alone. After successfully bypassing marriage laws, Stephen and Katie relocated to a house in a cul-de-sac in Knightdale, North Carolina, just 20 minutes from his mother's home, and began to live openly as husband and wife. Katie gave birth to their son, Bennett Kieran Pladl, on the 1st of September 2017, but the family's happily ever after was short-lived. Stephen and Katie were arrested in January of 2018 and extradited to Henrico County to face charges of incest and, in Stephen's case, for contributing to the delinquency of a minor. Stephen was released 1 month later on a $28,000 bond and on the condition he was to have no contact with Katie. Katie was also bailed out and ordered to move back with her adoptive parents in New York. Stephen's 72-year-old mother, Grace, was given custody of their baby boy, Bennett. The controversial relationship made headline news.
20-year-old Katie Pladl, who was also Stephen's daughter. She was adopted at birth by the Fusco family in Wingdale, New York. At 18, she wanted to find her birth parents. She did, even moving in with them and eventually sleeping with and marrying her biological father.
You may recall that those individuals were the subject of an arrest here in Knightdale back in January 2018.
Stephen's lawyer issued statements arguing that Stephen had never pressured Katie into a relationship. Meanwhile, 20-year-old Katie attempted to settle back into life at home. She took work cleaning her grandmother's house in Waterbury, Connecticut every Tuesday and Thursday. With time away from Stephen to reflect, she began to gain clarity on some of the choices she had made. On the 11th of April, she phoned Stephen to tell him that she wanted out of the marriage. She hoped to end things on a civil note and then raise their son Bennett in a healthy environment. But Katie didn't know who she was dealing with. When repeated attempts to change her mind failed, Stephen set upon another plan for his family. On Thursday, April the 12th, 2018, Tony Fusco and his adopted daughter Katie left their Dover home in a black pickup truck for the town of Waterbury, where Katie had a job cleaning her grandmother's house. Unbeknownst to them, a man was watching them in a nearby Honda minivan. As they pulled out of the drive, he swung out behind them and began following closely behind. A few minutes later, they came to a stop at an intersection. There were a few cars on the road that morning, and several witnesses happened to watch as the minivan pulled up alongside the truck and the man opened his window. They watched as he pulled out an Arrow assault-type rifle, pointed it at the window, and emptied it into the cabin of the truck. When police arrived at the scene, they found the bodies of 56-year-old Tony Fusco and 20-year-old Katie Pladl still strapped in their seats. They had been killed instantly. Soon after, the same minivan was found just over the state border in Dover, New York. In the front seat of the van was a man who was dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. That man was, of course, Stephen Pladl. Another 911 call had, meanwhile, been made in the city of Cary, North Carolina, by Stephen's mother, Grace Pladl.
He killed his baby and used in the house.
Okay, you said that he told you he killed his baby. Okay, ma'am, listen to me. What's your name?
Police were immediately dispatched to conduct a welfare check at the home of Stephen Pladl in Knightdale, North Carolina. Lying in the closet of an upstairs bedroom, they found the lifeless body of a baby boy. He had been suffocated. After getting off the phone from Katie on April the 11th, Stephen had called his mother to tell her that he was picking up baby Bennett for a Skype call with Katie. Stephen was banned by the courts from any contact with Katie, but not from seeing his son, an oversight that would cost Bennett his life. Stephen's mother agreed. After picking up the baby, Stephen took him home and suffocated the 7-month-old infant with a pillow. He then hid the baby's body in a wardrobe and drove the 600-mile trip through the night to the home of Tony and Kelly Fusco. He knew they would be heading to Waterbury that morning, and he waited in his van to ambush her. During the drive, Stephen called his mother. It was around 7 a.m. He told her that he'd decided to visit Katie with the baby and was almost there. An hour and 45 minutes later, at 8:45 a.m., he phoned her for the last time. This time, it was to tell her that he had killed his son Bennett and shot dead both Katie and her father Tony. The murders shook the community to its core.
20-year-old Katie Pladl and 56-year-old Anthony Fusco were killed in his pickup truck in New Milford yesterday by multiple gunshots from an assault rifle. Police say pulling that trigger was Stephen Pladl, who was Katie's father, husband, and father of her baby.
The father that raised her, the adoptive father, she had came up here, staying with him in Wingdale, and next thing you know, there's a shooting.
Responding officers on scene were able to determine that the suspect in this case had died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound.
Katie, Bennett, and Anthony Fusco were laid to rest on the 21st of April at St. Charles Borromeo Church in Dover Plains, New York. Alyssa sent flowers but declined to go, choosing to bypass any further media attention. The case involving Stephen and Katie Pladl is deeply tragic and thought-provoking. It sheds light on the taboo subject of incest and its disastrous consequences, which often remain hidden and are rarely discussed in open society. Share your thoughts on this case in the comments section below.